Hey everyone, it's Austin with Casters of the Cards, along with.
Dane here as well, and today we're going to talk about
Uh,
your favorite deck.
yeah, this is one of my first decks. So we're going to talk about Animar Soul of Elements, and this is a $50 budget deck, and I slightly updated it for this year. So let's go ahead and get into the deck theme. So the deck theme is face down creatures, um, and that includes Morph, Manifest Dread, which is Manifest, and Cloak, which gives you a mysterious creature reminder. So really, we're going to be using morphs and all the like, and we're going to turn them face down, and we're going to play a lot of them. And later on, we're going to turn them face up, and we're going to get a different effect from our creatures, and it's going to be slightly a surprise because no one's going to know what it is.
Why are we running morphs in an Animar deck?
That's a good question. Well, playing a morph is still casting a creature, so it actually puts a counter on Animar, and we don't have it listed here, but all morphs may be played for 3 generic mana, which means once you have 3 counters on Animar, you can play morphs for free. Manifest and Cloak, or the disguises, I mean, and the Manifest Dread, they cost a different. They won't be cost down by Animar for free, but Animar will cost down all of our morphs for free, so we could play as many morphs out of our hand as we have. So we can go ahead and talk about what's good and bad about that, and the deck building pros and cons. So the pros are definitely the surprise element. Um, we can quickly get creatures onto the battlefield, like we just talked about costing them down. And Morph is an instant speed, non-stack special action. So that's something that's we're gonna jot down as a pro because it's
I'm pretty sure you're still making that up. That doesn't
no
because you're
no
casting a creature for an alternative cost. It
it
doesn't.
is it is, but flipping it face up from being face down, that is the special action, and no one can do anything about that. As long as you have priority, you're allowed to flip them face up for their morph cost. And once they're flip face up, usually they have abilities or effects that we're going to be wanting to activate or just get immediately. And that's where our opponents are not going to like not knowing what we have face down. But there's a couple of cons here too. Why don't you go ahead and go over all these cons that we came up with?
Well, let's just get the elephant out of the room. You're saying it's a surprise as a pro and a con?
Yes, because it's a pro, because people don't know what we have, and that's going to scare people. That's why it's also a con. People are probably going to think that we might have something when we might actually not have something. We could just have a morph that flips face up and we draw a card. Or we could have a morph that you flip face up and it's a board wipe.
Yeah, and I just assume every time that there's a secret card, I should just remove it. So that's why you don't like playing with me.
Exactly, and that ties into the morphs are still creatures, so they can be interacted with. So if someone does think, ooh, you've got this super secret special card, um, they can just eeny, meeny, miny, mo and pick one, or they can board wipe, and you're going to lose your morphs. Um, and you got to remember, even though Animar might be making them free, it still costs mana to flip them face up. So that's something that we'll kind of talk about whenever we get into the mana ramp and some of our interaction and stuff. I guess let's go ahead and move on to the deck breakdown here. So pretty average, I think. I don't think there's anything out of the ordinary here too much. Do you approve of these deck numbers?
It's not a. I mean, these are just the facts as they are, right? You've got 34 themed cards, meaning face down, or cards that will reflip your face down cards. You've got 17 mana rocks, dorks, etc. Ways to accelerate your game plan. 13 card advantage slash cards draw. 19 interaction. That's a pretty high number. Um,
Yeah,
What that requires.
I was kind of wondering if you'd say something about that. That is a kind of high number, isn't it? Because we usually, what number do we usually look at? I think.
I think we aim for 10 to 12 in most decks. So 19 is quite a bit above that.
Yeah, but I think I do have.
Is it
I have
just
a
because that
couple
one
less.
more card happens to be interaction?
It yeah. I kind of added a few more in here too because I don't have as many mass disruption or mass interaction. I'm kind of low on that at 5, which some
Okay,
people might want a few more of. But I do have 38 lands,
that's something.
and I've have given this rating of the fourth bracket on the bracket list, which is optimized. Um, it is slightly a few cards were in here that I took away that were actually making it a bracket 4, but now it's bracket 2, supposedly. Um, and my conclusion is while the stack uses no game changers, it's still a commander that can be very difficult for white and black colored commanders, which it is a lot more prevalent than you think because the commander damage, and every time you play your morphs, Animar is going to get a counter. So then Animar is going to get really big, and you can get 20 counters on him pretty easily. Enough that it'll, when he attacks someone and they can't block him, will take him out for commander damage. Also, there are a few combos, but there are 2 or 3 card combos that are not tutorable and they don't heavily impact the game. Um, we're not really going to talk about them. They're not really worth it. So they are just in here contributing to being above a 2. Anyways, why don't we go ahead and move on to the land ramp now? So
Ooh, I love land ramp. That's my favorite part of the deck.
that then this is your favorite kind of ramp. So you take a look at it. We're in green, so you know what that means. We're gonna be using
To be honest,
creatures.
Wayfarer's Bobble, that's kind of. No, I didn't expect that to be in this 3-color deck like this with green. I would have skipped it myself.
Yeah, well, we're Animar such a low CMC though, being just one red, one blue, and one green that we kind of have to get going quick. So if we're able to pull that Wayfarer's Bauble off turn 1 and then turn 2, maybe get the extra land, we're going to be casting Animar just that much more consistently or quicker. Um, Also, we have the basic like lower mana stuff like Nature's Lore. You could put 3 visits in. Farseek again. We've got Blighted Woodland as like a after our commander. Soccer Tribe Elder is a creature, so later on we could play it and put a counter on Animar, or we can play it early, get land out. Generally, we want to use creatures, and most of the land ramp, other than what's presented here, is creature. So why don't we go ahead and move on to the other ramp, which is the non-land ramp, which is your least favorite.
The Mana, Rocks, and Dorks.
Yes. So, as I have stated here, due to Animar's cost down ability, it's just that much easier to be able to play Mana Dorks. Once he has a few counters, also we want to put counters on him. So if we're going to ramp at all, it kind of should be with creatures. We even have a Morphorn in here. Look at that one, the Radiclaw Mystic. That fits the theme of the deck. It has Morph on it. Normal stuff: Soul Ring, Arcane Signet. We want Fellwar Stone. It's a 2 mana ramp. Um, Pretty much just some of your best mana dork creatures to help round out everything. Overgrown Zealot also does produce double mana if he's turning a permanent face up, so that will help us pay for our cost. So kind of interesting on that.
Yeah, that's a new clutch in from Duskmourn, right?
It is, yeah. I think it went. I think it's kind of intended for the Manifest Dread, because I'm pretty sure that was the only face down mechanic in Dustmorn. But that it turning face up is just a game action, so that works for us as well. So it kind of doesn't matter. We just get to reap the rewards.
Well, what else do we have in this deck?
Well, we've got some pretty interesting card advantage. So we are casting creatures, like you said earlier. So we've got something in here like Beast Whisperer. But if you look at some of these other things, we're actually drawing cards for anything that we do. So if, and I kind of have them in order here, if we cast a creature or morph, we draw a card. When a face down creature that you cast enters the battlefield, we're going to draw a card. When that face up creature that we cast that entered gets turned face up, we're going to draw a card. Then guess what? When that face up creature that we cast that entered that got turned face up deals damage, we're going to draw a card again.
Oh
So
man,
we really have all the options in here for this.
you've kind of I mean, a few years ago when you first built this deck, you did not have as much support for face up and face down as you do now. So it's really starting to smooth out. I didn't expect. I mean, definitely didn't expect Duskmorn to have any face down support, but I don't think anybody expected detectives to also be face down either. So you've
Yeah,
really you've really gotten lucky with what they determine should interact and what shouldn't.
I think so. And something I like, which I jotted down here, is we get a variety, which means if we were to have 5 Beast Whisperers out and we morphed like 5 cards, sure, we would draw 5 cards. Um, but that's kind of where we hit a wall. And with Animar, what a lot of people like to do is they like to put almost exclusively creatures in the deck because at some point you're able just to throw your whole deck onto the field because you draw a card, you play it for free, then you draw another card because you played that card, and I don't quite have that exact approach where I'm able to spew the whole deck onto the table right away. Um, I definitely want to get a lot of creatures out, but I'm kind of playing it a little more conservatively than kind of putting all my eggs in one basket like that. And that's why I like all these different ways of card advantage because while throughout a game they're going to be inconsistent when I play it, um, stacking up on one or two of these means when I am able to get the creatures in my deck out because I don't have as many as other people, I'll draw more cards, so hopefully I'll get more creatures that way rather than just having more creatures crammed into my deck. Um, I might hit a creature and a non creature. Maybe I hit 2 creatures. Obviously, I can hit none, and then I kind of have to stop from there. But I'm sure you can explain as well from gameplay that sometimes I'm able just to keep drawing and playing creatures right after another, and it starts getting
Oh
a
yeah.
little intimidating.
Animar can very easily, very quickly, I'd say within 5 turns, be at a point where you can put all of your morphs on the battlefield for no cost. And at that point, it's a guessing game of what do you remove and can you survive not board wiping it. So it could get out of hand pretty quick.
Yeah, and just as a final note on this too, it's worth pointing out a lot of the decks that run just exclusively creatures, or like more than 50, um, they're using a lot of cards that I've ended up cutting over the years that were morphs. And even with all of the new face down cards, I still have under 50 creatures that I think are good enough.
No, my understanding from the general Animar morph build is that people tend to not flip them over. They focus on getting out the creatures, the tutus, and that seems to be the majority of the game plan. Morphing
For
them
sure.
after the fact doesn't always seem to be the main strategy, which you've clearly focused on being able to do both.
Yeah, and I really like being able to morph them and turn them up, and let's go take a look at some of our why would I want to do that? And well, some of it is the interaction. So a lot of the morph cards have, whenever you turn them face up, they're gonna do something very similar to the following. Uh, they can bounce cards to hands. They can destroy cards on the field, or or a lot of them actually counter spells. I think there's 4 cards that counter or redirect spells when they're morphed, and because no one can interact with those, that's kind of awesome because I can counter spells and then that's kind of it. No one can stop me from countering their spell, and I think it makes it just a little bit better than a normal counter spell for sure. Um, and then obviously there's stuff like Chrome Shell Crab, which is kind of a standout one because when he's morphed, you can exchange control of a target creature you control and target creature an opponent controls. So it doesn't have to be the crab. If you say want to flip the crab back down and then back up and do it again, you could just be giving your opponent's cards. And since we're able to manifest in this deck, you could be giving them lands so that they can't do anything with, or you could just be giving them creatures that you've already used up that they can't do anything with. It just helps provide quite a variety, and that's the single target removal or target interaction. Um, I put the numbers down here, so I have 12 that are on creature bodies, and I have 5 that are not. And that's anything from the break down the door that I have here to stuff like Chaos Warp or Beast Within. So just kind of your normal staples that find their way into most decks.
It's a pretty good mix there. Definitely focused on the creatures.
Yep,
And you've got our Mass Disruption next, um, which,
I do.
funny enough, seems to be focused on creatures.
It is, and you may understand this like I understand this, but for a budget, especially green, blue, and red running on top of a creature strategy, there are not a lot of board wipes that aren't going to hit you as well. You
Yeah,
kind of
not a lot
have
of
to.
one-sided vibes.
Yeah, like I have Mismium Mortars in here, and I don't think a lot of people would want that in their deck as well. But this is one of the only red deals damage to creatures that doesn't hit your creatures because I can't rely on all mine having like flying or not flying. I kind of have a mix of creatures that have different forms of evasion, so I can't really do an earthquake or something like that. So almost all my removal is, or my mass disruption is blue, which I'm sure you can think of like a few reasons why it would probably be a problem.
Yeah, let's talk about your clearly your standout staple removal in this kind of deck, Ixodron.
Oh yeah, for sure. So Ixodron is an awesome card. For people that have not seen this, this is a menace. Um, it is a 3 blue illusion creature. As Ixodron enters the battlefield, turn all other non-token creatures face down. They're not morphs, but they are 2/2 creatures, and it's worth pointing out that if your cards get turned face down and they don't have the morph ability on them like mine do, you can't get them back. I can get mine back though because they have the morph ability on them. But if your Dragon commander gets flipped face down, you can't turn it face back up.
Right, you can't turn it face back up, and you can't use the command zone rule to put it back in the command zone because it hasn't changed zones. It's still the same permanent, so it hasn't gone anywhere. Therefore, you have nothing to do but to let your commander sit there and do nothing.
Exactly. And what that puts the game state into when everyone has their commander out and I play Ixodron is attacking and not blocking. Because if you block that face down Dragon, you're going to kill it because it's a 2/2. It's going to go back to the command zone and they're going to recast it. But if you remember how to play the shell game right, you don't block it, and you can kind of lock people out of their commanders for a while, or they have to end up doing something really wonky, like destroying their own card. Um, I think the big way out of this would be sack outlets. Not a lot of decks run all sack outlet though, and especially in something like that Her Dragon. So you got to really be mindful about that. The rest of Ixodron's text is just that he has power and toughness equal to the number of face down creatures on the battlefield. So that can also be good too because if someone has 100 creatures out, you turn them face down and then you have a 100. So that's worth pointing out. I think the other standout card here that before we move on that I want to talk about is the Brine Elemental though. That is actually part of a combo that I talked about on that deck breakdown page. It's called the Pickle combo, and if you see when Brine Elemental is turned face up, each opponent skips their next untap step, which is not very fun.
Oh my goodness.
And you see how Ixodron can turn stuff face down. Well, guess what? There's definitely a card in here that, for a certain amount of mana, just lets you turn a card face down, which means every single turn I can flip Brine Elemental face down and face up, and for the rest of the game, there are no untapped steps until someone interacts with me. Which, again, when it's in when it's timed inconveniently, that can kind of shut some people out of the game. But that's kind of the only big combo. And it's just kind of if I get it. They are both on creatures, which is good though. Why don't we go ahead and move down to the stats? So there's some pretty interesting stats here, but they're kind of basic.
A lot of creatures, as we might have guessed from this creature strategy.
Yes. Yep. So with Animar, we end up with 41 creatures. So not quite half the deck. I think I've been moving more and more towards that direction lately, um, especially with all those different types of draw. But you can see that it's mostly creature, it's mostly lands, and I have a little bit of a sprinkle of everything else. And you can look at the CMC. It's a little. The CMC is a little elusive though because Animar is going to be costing our creatures down.
Right. Morph class are not going to get factored into this.
Exactly. That, and on pen and paper, I've definitely taken every morph into consideration for not only its morph cost, but also its flip cost. And that's not something that I don't think any online website takes into consideration the alternative cost on any card right now, unless you go manually type it in and tell it to do that.
Yeah, and it's just as a side note, that's disappointing because there's a lot of decks that have weird alternative costs, whether it be adventures or transform cards.
Or Omen, like the new dragons that have Omen.
So decks like this, you really gotta play so you understand the flow before making a decision on if you need more ramp or less ramp, because it might not be as because it's estimated to be a 3.4, but it does skew a little higher because those 2/2 morphs don't do much on their own.
That's true, and a lot of the flip costs on some of these cards are I have some sevens, some fives. I definitely probably have a double bell curve where I would kind of curve out at two and then drop back down and then probably curve back out around five or six for sure with all those taken into consideration. You can see it's mostly a green deck, not as much red. Red has kind of got the short end of the stick for morph, manifest, disguise, manifest dread. You'd think it might get a little more, but green and blue have gotten the most over the years. But we can go ahead and go on to the full deck list. So here's just a full breakdown of the entire deck, so people are able to view that here. I don't know if there's anything in particular that you would want to talk about here. I think
You're running how many modal lands in this deck?
so I am running 5 modal
Oh,
lands.
you say then you are hitting that 38 lands.
Yes, I'm hitting exactly 38 lands, and I'm running some snow lands in here. It does look like I might need to go back and touch up and make sure to put into the north in my sorceries. That way I can swap out probably Nature's Lore. That way I can go get those snow lands. And it does look like it may have put. I think it may have put some of my maybe board cards in here actually. So, without without compromising the integrity of the video, I will just say the Seaborn Muse, the Vivian, and definitely the Sink into Stupor, and the let's say those are all cards that are on my sideboard. So those are definitely cards I've been considering. I might make the swap to those soon. Vivian is good for creature decks. Seaborn Muse is something that came out because it is a card that's gonna push me up on the list of the bracket system. Oh, and then I definitely have. I know it's in here somewhere. I no longer have the statue in here that creates an infinite combo with Animar. Um, I guess you can kind of talk about that while I kind of look for the name over here. Like, what's your experience with my infinite combo statue?
It, it's an infinite mana combo, correct? If I remember right.
It's the statue that's 3 generic mana, so then Animar just makes the casting cost free, and it bounces a creature, which you can target itself. So it's it makes an infinite ETB trigger, so an infinite
That's
counters.
that's
Yeah.
right. So it makes Animar infinitely big. Um, which honestly speaking doesn't. I mean, as long as you're not in white or black, it isn't is that big of a deal. Animar being huge. I mean, Animar really has to hit what 5 counters before you could, or not even 5. Yeah, 5. No, it would be 5 to cast everything for
Uh,
free because your
three, just
Megamorph
three.
Megamorphs. Well,
No,
you have Megamorphs in the stick?
I do have some Megamorphs, but the Megamorph is actually on the flip portion, but not the morph portion.
Oh, so it's still just 3.
Yes.
Okay. Well, then, yeah. My point is the deck is around casting your creatures for free. So, Animar being infinitely big is significant if you don't have a way to block it. But otherwise, it's not the end of the world. Uh, Nevertheless, it was an impactful combo.
Yeah, and it is the ancestral statue combo, so that's the other card that would need to be removed from the list. Uh, so total in conclusion, um, I personally think Animar makes a fun and pretty unique deck. There's a few other morph specific commanders, and while Animar has plenty of different ways that you're able to build him because his ability is very powerful, I like pairing it with the morph mechanic, and I think a lot of other people do too. And even though I'm not completely just dumping my deck every game, I kind of like sitting in the middle and being a little more conservative with it because I like having the surprise element. And that surprise element makes it pretty fun to pilot every time. And like we talked about, I think the most important thing here is definitely rule zero talk with people that are only playing Orzhov or mono white or mono black. Um, they're not gonna like Animar only because he has protection. And what's gonna end up happening is he's gonna be a 12/12 and you're gonna hit him twice and they can't do anything about it and you'll get commander damage and they'll feel super targeted. It's definitely happened a couple of times in our group. Um, Even if Animar doesn't have the infinite counters on him and he's like a million, 3 hits from Animar that they can't block and they're gonna feel like they got kind of shut out of the game because they just can't really do anything with it. I think would you pretty much agree with that?
Yeah, it just feels bad if you're not prepared. If you're not if you're not building your deck in a way to consider things like protection or hexproof, then you might get caught off guard when you don't have an answer to a commander like Animar. Um, Certainly, there's ways to get around it if you have enough board wipes or if you have enough edict effects. Um, then there's nothing you could do if I make you sacrifice your highest power creature. But not everybody's building their decks with that because a lot of play groups you don't need to run those kinds of cards. So definitely give people a heads up so that they're not um, feeling oppressed.
Yeah, and definitely for yourself. I don't think I would ever want to be considered arch enemy in a only white and black other than Animar pod. I think that would kind of make me feel like Everyone's always going to be gunning for me because I'm just going to have that free shot in on them, and I don't think that's something I want to put on top of the fact that I have all these surprise cards that could be absolutely anything. So, but yeah, in conclusion, I really think it's a good deck. I think I've had it for about 5 or 6 years now, and I think I've definitely played it. I think I've probably played it at least 100 times at this point, and it's definitely seen a couple of iterations, but this is the latest one, and definitely comment if you have any thoughts or opinions on it. And that's going to be the deck tech for today.
Thanks, guys.